Hi, I'm Seth Jackson. I'll be presenting my presentation of Hallsdale Powell Utilities Tap Water. My objectives in this research was to find out the concentration of nitrates in the water, compare the values to what is acceptable in drinking water, and analyze the results to determine the significance of these values. Let's learn a little bit more about this business. Hallsdale Powell Utility District Incorporated was established in 1954. They passed all legal regulations in their latest quarter from January to March in 2019. The legal regulations does not mean that the water is safe. Environmental Working Group states federal drinking water standards are often woefully inadequate to protect public health because the regularity process does not consider the heightened vulnerability of children, infants, and developing fetus to toxic chemicals. In addition, there are no enforcing federal health standards for many chemicals known to pose risk, leaving the public susceptible to harm from new and emerging chemicals in tap water. This quote was from EWG's article named Standards for Safe Drinking Water. This chart shows you what all is found in Hallsdale Powell Utility District Incorporated by the Environmental Work Group. Even though the chemicals in this chart are all under the legal limit or have no limit to go by, they are all over the guidelines set by the Environmental Work Group. These concentrations in the Environmental Work Group's guidelines are what they deem safe. Many of these chemicals can cause cancer or other medical problems. I focused my research on nitrates. The time of year can have an effect on what the nitrite and nitrate levels are, since they are found in fertilizer, septic tanks, and manure storage or spreading operations. According to McCasland, Trotman, Porter, and Wagnet. According to Benmar's research in 2012, nitrates are transformed into nitrites when they come in contact with some bacteria in your digestive system. The nitrates transform the hemoglobin cells into methemoglobin cells, which affects the amount of oxygen that can be carried throughout your body. These nitrates can also make N-nitroso compounds, which are known to lead to cancer and birth defects among animals, according to Benmar's research in 2012. In Denmark, there was a study that showed people, mostly males, who drank water with a concentration of 0.7 to 2 parts per million of nitrate and ate lots of red meat had a much higher chance of getting colon cancer, according to Stoddard's research in 2019. According to Stoddard's same research, the chances of getting cancer from water is very slim when the nitrate concentration levels is 0.14 parts per million. The average nitrate levels in tap water in the United States is 4.96 parts per million. This is concerning since it can cause cancer to unknowing consumers who drink it. Sadly, the United States has such a 10 parts per million limit which only protects us from the extreme amounts. Now we come to my research method. Some of my research questions include what are the concentration of nitrites in water? If there were any, why did the changes occur from previous tests? And what are some changes or maintenance requirements to improve these levels? My research method was purely experimental. For my samples collected, I randomly chose 10 businesses that uses Hallsdale's utility services and use their sinks to acquire 3 separate 100 milliliter containers of water. I ran the sink faucets for 2 minutes prior to filling up the containers to obtain water that has not been sitting in the business's pipes, and the samples were collected on February 28, 2020 between the hours of 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. The analytical instrument that I used was Hanna colorimeter, used in measuring the concentration of nitrites in water. To use this, you place a capsule with a sample in the reader to zero it before placing the reactant H1708-0. When this reactant mixes with the nitrites of the solution, it causes a greenish-brown tint to form. The reactant is then poured into the capsule and dissolved. Then you start the reader. We now come to the results of my research method. The following is the amount of parts per million of nitrites was found in each business. TVA Credit Union at 1, Hall Cinema 7 at 0, Burger King at 2, McDonald's at 1, Wendy's at 3, Zaxby's at 1, Walgreens at 1, Arby's at 1, Hardee's at 1, and Weigel's at 3. The average was 1.5 parts per million, and the standard deviation was around 0.94. We now need to analyze the information that we have obtained. Even though the average of 1.5 parts per million is over the Environmental Work Group health guideline, the average could still be altered through the different piping and filters each company possesses. The standard deviation is very low, so the average should represent roughly the amount of concentration of the nitrates there is in Hallsdale Utility Services water pipes. Since the samples were taken in a time in which fertilizers were not being utilized as much, the concentration would most likely increase as the temperature increases as well. In conclusion, the average concentration of nitrites was 1.5 parts per million. Previous reports say that they had 0.459 parts per million, which is over 3 times less than I have recorded. They were most likely able to access the water from a water source more reliable than what I had access to, along with better equipment. With this, they can more accurately obtain and read results of the water samples than I could from running in and out of different businesses, obtaining water through the business's sinks. Even if the nitrate levels was half of what I have recorded, Hallsdale Powell Utility Company could try to improve their water quality to help their consumers. They can do this by bettering their filtration systems and obtaining a cleaner supply of surface water. Even though their nitrite levels isn't as low as they could be, they are better than the majority of America's water systems. Thanks to Eugene Da Silva for giving necessary equipment, testing the water samples, and revising my PowerPoint.